Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Thursday, April 3rd, 2025 at 9:05 in the morning. We're starting our day with a few introductions. 10 o'clock. First one up is H390 and H391, both sponsored by Representative Priestley.
Hello, Mitty.
Hello.
All right. Yeah, good to see you again. It was a long trip over here. Great. So 390. So this one is the nickname for this is Building Better Online Businesses Act. To give a little bit of background, so with all the data privacy and AI stuff, that has just led to network explosion of me talking to people in more kind of like highly specific tailored sectors, kind of similar to the non-disclosure bill that we looked at. In this case, I'm following a bunch of people who are like watchdog organizations like Check My Ads, digital advertising watchdog orgs. Also former Google employee who started a company called Web X-Ray to basically track the trackers. So figure out when somebody spends money on online ads. One, like where do the ads actually end up online? Do they actually get in front of the customer's eyes that the businesses think they do? And then also when people have pixel trackers on different websites, how many different kind of like data brokers or ad tech is tracking a person across how many different platforms and kind of like what they're picking up along the way. One of the like stories I heard when I sat down with somebody in this space was, I mean, some of it I'm going to go over in a minute, where if we're talking about people taking out ads, so we're talking about small businesses dumping money into ads, but also we're talking about when it comes to like using artificial intelligence, people being able to create basically scam campaigns, create fake businesses by being able to read the descriptions of the most horrifying one for me hearing was locksmiths. So the ability for people, so say we have Joe Schmo who's like doing a locksmith business in Vermont, but then scammers are able to basically, go to his page, figure out what it means to represent yourself as a locksmith, and then create a bunch of spin-off fake companies that then people go to hire the services that don't actually exist and they get scammed. So that got so prolific in the locksmith sector that the FBI had to create a verification website that people went through in order to list themselves online as a locksmith. And this, going off of that same type of thing, it's expected that as we see like better AI tools and the just kind of the unregulated ad tech space, that that will become even more spread across like carpenters and plumbers and like anybody that you're expecting to hire services from, diluting kind of the industry with scam ads that you're getting presented with. So it becomes dangerous as well. I sent Anna Grace for each of these kind of like a overview. So I'm going to read some of the stats so I don't screw them up. So digital advertising is an unregulated $700 billion industry plagued by fraud, deception, and exploitation. Over the last 3 decades, the self-interest of advertising technology brokers have given rise to a massive amount of fraud and harms small businesses, publishers, and citizens. The current digital advertising industry hurts small businesses. So for every $1 spent on ads, 36 cents actually reaches the consumer. Around 29 cents goes towards fees to ad tech brokers. Another 35 cents goes to low quality media, including the invalid traffic, IVT that I was talking about, and also made for advertising, MFA, which is like the kind of like stealth copies of sites, in non-viewable, non-measurable inventory. It fuels organized crime, so ad fraud is likely to exceed $84 billion globally by 2025 on current trends, and is estimated by the World Federation of Advertisers to be second only to the drug trade as a source of income for organized crime. So that's the scamming piece. Funds harmful content and child sexual abuse material, CSAM. I've seen a lot of articles blowing up in this space recently. So ad tech brokers have been found to place ads on and monetize websites known to host child sexual abuse material, piracy, and those owned by foreign actors already sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department. It also diverts revenue from news. So in the United States alone, ad tech brokers send an estimated $1.62 billion to low-quality websites instead of legitimate news. So an example one of the people in this space gave me was, like, if you're trying to get to Forbes.com, you might get to like, I think it was like Forbes3.com or something. So it's like kind of like copies of sites that aren't actually legitimate. And $1 sent to $1 sent to low quality media, exacerbating the revenue crisis for news publishers. Oh, sorry. I skipped a line. For every $2.16 of digital ad spend sent to legitimate news organizations, $1 of that is sent to low quality media, exacerbating the revenue crisis for news publishers. Digital advertising is bought and sold through a complex supply chain. Brokers buy and sell digital advertising space on behalf of clients, advertisers, and publishers in real time through automated auctions across millions of websites and apps. I'm not going to read the rest of that, but the kind of the real-time bidding engine that drives a lot of this is something I've been looking a lot into and would love for us to explore. Ad tech brokers also have no duty to act in the best interest of the advertisers and publishers they serve, and often do not share the necessary information for clients to audit the relationship. For instance, businesses often struggle to access the necessary information to verify on what websites their advertisements are being displayed. The information asymmetry between broker and client has allowed for perverse incentives to take hold. And actually talking to a company in Vermont, software company that does do advertising with its clientele across the state, company that we all use every day, I think, talking about how they don't even give the stats to the companies who advertise on their site because they know they are so bloated and inaccurate that they're just like, they don't actually trust them, and they don't want people to get a false sense of like where that spend goes. So they have people advertise on their software, but otherwise they don't give things like Google Analytics reports and things like that, because they don't want people to have a false idea of what's going on. So the proposal is the Building Better Online Businesses Act. We can fix these problems with the same common sense regulatory principles we find in other supply chains and global financial markets. The Building Better Online Businesses Act would right the system by giving control back to businesses and publishers using 4 key policy mechanisms. So place limits on common ownership, establish a duty of care for ad tech brokers, require know your customer rules, and mandate transparency. That's it. I'll stop there. This is a short form, so none of the text is in the bill. It would be in the bill if everybody wants to do it. All right.
Can you hear a little more about common ownership?
Yeah, I'm going to read off this because so ownership limits would prevent any single company from controlling both sides of the digital advertising marketplace. So implementing these limits would promote competition, increase transparency, and ensure a fair marketplace for advertisers, publishers, and consumers. I can have like plenty of people who are willing to come in and talk through all of these who track them. So. All right, cool. All right, next one. So this was inspired by work. So the last one was inspired by WebXray and Check My Ads. This one was inspired by Internet Safety Labs. So they run a scorecard website called App Microscope. And if you go to it, they do a whole scorecard of like what the apps and websites and things like that are, which ones are have trackers on them, which ones are selling to data brokers your personal information. They actually have I'm actually gonna pull it up for myself just so I can read it. Actually, I read stats. So they publish a report called the Data Broker Presence in US K through 12 benchmark apps. So these are apps used in schools. So in general, out of their report, 243 apps or 15.8% of tested apps sent data to registered data brokers. The 243 apps sending data to data brokers communicated with a shocking 6.7 data brokers on average. This means that when children use these apps, their information will be sent to several data brokers. The top app categories sending data to data brokers were news apps, 77%, reference apps, 37%, sports apps, 32%, community engagement apps, 26%. I have the stats for Vermont for software that's used in our schools. So 11 of the schools in the state with at least one app with data broker traffic. There's 13 schools sampled per state, so only 2 of the schools did not. 85% of schools in the state of Vermont are using at least one app with a data broker traffic. 15 apps total across the spectrum of the schools using these that had data broker traffic. 6 total unique apps. We do not have a state children's privacy law. We do have a state student data privacy law. But as I was doing research around FERPA and around what we had when it came to minor protections, I talked to a software vendor who had, at the time we talked, like he said, the first 5 schools that he had, so the first 4 out of 5 that he had made a contract with and had his software, which is not tracking and selling to data brokers, but as his software that schools were using, the first 4 didn't ask him about privacy protections or anything like that, even though we have a mandatory Student Data Privacy Act that covers like software vendors in schools. The final one, the 5th one, was a private school that did ask, and it made him realize that none of the other schools had done it, but they're mandated by state law to be asking. And he showed me the contract he had to fill out that discloses kind of like what their software does. So that was a major gap.
It's 391.
Yeah, 391. Yeah. So in general, this was just an example of the types of things that goes into the Business Model Transparency Act, which is basically that like when we're using apps ourselves, when schools are using apps, when the government is using apps, like we need to have some kind of transparency into what personal information is being disclosed and sold without us kind of knowing that. So I have just a list of stats on that page, but this really, it doesn't cover it when it comes to the Privacy Act. Like it would make it so businesses need to have privacy policies and things like that. But this is more of an actual like business model notice where it's a transparency document, kind of showing how much money and like kind of where they're making money off of selling data, tracking data. So notice must declare a company's legal name, including DBAs, which there's a lot of companies that have multiple kind of subsidiary DBAs. The U.S. state of registration, the legal name of the parent company. It would have to declare all revenue streams, including percentages of net revenue, that is sale of goods, sale of services, including subscriptions, licensing, digital advertising, data monetization, which breaks down into personal data monetization and non-personal data monetization. They need to declare personal data exchanges, so when the company gives or receives data in exchange for valuable consideration. And this includes the use of marketing platforms and identity resolution platforms, which exchange bulk personal data, usually for the purpose of personalization. Quotation marks. The business model notice must also be concise as possible and presented at the time the consumer is engaging with the business or their products. The privacy policy can and should elaborate on the specifics of the personal information monetization. Yes. The website, the app microscope is fascinating, so I suggest going on there and taking a look. appmicroscope.org.
What does that do?
It like does scorecard. Here, I'll actually just pull it up and I'll like I can't show you, I'm not on the Zoom, but I'll just kind of explain. So on there, you can search for different apps. Let me just, let's see. So for instance, yeah, okay. I'm gonna pull up what everybody knows. So Coursera, iOS apps, the app for your Apple phone, it gets a critical risk score. And then basically it just goes through what are the different companies, a number of companies that they sell the data to, on like how risky the behavior is. Like, do they do ads? Do they do targeted behavioral type ads on what you're doing? So it just has this whole scorecard of like how risky is the app you're using as far as leaking your and selling your personal information. Yeah.
I'm just more of a comment. I think that what I'm hearing, just the last two that you've talked about, feel like there should be some sort of thought about some outreach because there, I mean, I'm an IT guy. I didn't know about this app
Mhm.
microscope.
Mhm.
And I think most people, you know, in talking with the whole data privacy among my constituents, their eyes glaze over.
Mhm.
They're like, so,
Yeah.
and I don't think people realize the seriousness of it.
Yeah.
And I think if we could make these resources, make them more available, let
Mhm.
people know, hey, this is what they're doing, I think it would help a lot
Yeah.
supporting some of these privacy bills
Yeah.
and letting people know what's really going on.
Totally. Yeah, and actually too, the web x-ray one is fascinating too on that site. So that's actually it's the tagline is tool for legal and compliance professionals to find privacy violations. So it's actually set up for businesses to be able to basically see if they're violating privacy. But it is fascinating. It is one where I searched with the person who created that. Just even in it was trying to look through FERPA, HIPAA, FICRA type of like violations. So we did a search of Vermont healthcare centers and found that a number of our hospitals are using this call center app, which is driven by AI, which has actually been in a number of different very public, very large data breaches. And it's not covered by HIPAA, but it is on some of our major medical center websites acting behind the scenes. So people don't know that when they're using that call service, they're actually giving their private information to an app that has been known to, not be good. So these tools are great.
The call center is intriguing.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you later.
I use healthcare a lot more than I used to, you know, so.
Mhm.
So how does that work again with the call center?
So the call, like basically the software that's kind of acting behind the scenes. So similar to this like app kind of like safety tracking. So the apps that we think are safe and most likely like I don't know that this you want to have the conversations with medical sector. They're basically like, oh, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes with our digital tools. I'm like, yeah, but that's that's what we have to be worried in 2025. So it's like tools that are being used that are then it might be in this case, it's a call center app which does intake of your like for your processing of your appointments. So you are selling potentially sensitive like
Actually a call when.
yeah, exactly. And then AI is transcribing.
In health center, health
Yeah.
networks, you communicate with them.
Yeah,
Actually.
exactly.
Talking about the actual call.
Well, yeah, call them chat thing. So there's lots of like
Oh.
different like software that's like acting on their behalf.
Okay.
And then I don't know that they looked in behind the scenes to see that one particular company was actually super scary as far as medical apps goes. Well,
Thank you.
thank you. I gotta go upstairs.
All right.
Good morning.
Morning. Coming in this morning.
Oh, thank you for having me. So at H420, it's a project specific TIF. I really tried to strike a balance between supporters of TIF and those that are skeptical. I know that we have several TIF related bills that are floating out there, such as Spark and HIT. Although I would support those completely, I believe that the bill that I have created puts more guardrails in place and might make it more attractive to folks. To be clear, it's more closely structured to the current TIF than it is Spark. it was me trying to compromise before having to compromise on a bill, which I have learned my lesson and will now shoot for the moon next time. But the increment breakdown, it's 70% for the ed fund and 85% for the municipal of the increment to be paid to the bond. The original taxable value of the TIF district, one of sorry, I'm going to a different point after that. So the current TIF is already set up 70% goes to the bond, 85% of the municipal side goes to the bond. That's what current statute says. I kept that in there because there's been some conversation about 100% going to the bond. One of the things that was brought up in some of our meetings were the fact that it takes a snapshot and then the ed fund goes down with a current TIF because it doesn't capture that increase that happens automatically with grand list values. So as part of my bill, I put in there an incremental increase every year, whether it only goes up to 3% of an increase, but it's still an increase. Which means that the ed fund never goes backwards. It can only go forward. It supports project advancing housing, businesses, and flood mitigation, which we're all, interested in. I know that I specifically designed it so that houses that are in flood zones could qualify for a TIF specific project, which the funds may be used to raise up current residential houses, which would keep people in their houses, and it would also make them flood resilient. It would obviously have to be done by the municipality. Currently, the only options we have really is FEMA buyouts, which takes it off the tax roll, which doesn't help the ed fund at all. The retention period, we've got the 5 years, of course, for incurring debt, but the retention period is modified so that once you pay off the bond, you're done. So if you're able to pay off the bond in 5 years, then you're generating hopefully a significant amount of money to the ed fund after 5 years, depending on, if you can pay it off. But it does go up to 20 years for paying off the bond. John Gray made the TIF outline in there much more digestible and more understandable for folks versus what it's currently a little confusing. And it requires a vote of the municipality to approve the bond. So.
Any questions?
Sorry. There actually isn't a limit on the project zone. It's kind of designed that way.
You mentioned a payoff of 5 years versus 20 years. So are you talking, would that be all worked out at the time they do the TIF, or is that like an early payoff? Like, they would be amortized over 20 years, but they get paid off as early as 5 years.
Sure. So let's specific project in Berry City, our city place. It went from a taxable revenue of somewhere around maybe $10,000, half of it going to education, half of it going to the municipality. We did City Place, and it now generates around $298,000 annually. So if we were to do a TIF bond for, say, $2 million, 70%, not $2 million, that wouldn't be good. That would push it up into that 20 years. But let's say we did a bond for $500,000 and 70% and 80% of that increase, you could pay it off in about 5 years. Am I doing my math correctly?
Well, I think more of what I'm wondering is that if you're talking about 5 years, 20 years, because right now I think the TIF says it needs to be 20 years.
Correct.
And what I'm trying to figure out is that negotiated at the time of taking out the TIF? So in other words, you say in your plan for doing the TIF, we're gonna pay this back in 5 years. Or is it a situation where a town could say, would bond it and say, well, we can pay in 20 years, but then it does really, really well. And they decide, oh, well, we can pay this off now and to free up some money for some other things. So we're gonna pay it off early.
So if the project becomes more of a grand list impact, because the set caps 70% and 85%, it may pay it off early without that being the plan. But the plan would be reviewed by VEPSI prior to it. I mean, the plan could be to pay it off sooner, but it just might get paid off sooner because of the fact that you're generating more revenue.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Representative O'Brien, we don't see you in here very often.
I was just upstairs.
If you'd like, have a seat and we can.
Sure. Yeah. Internet was not working and it finally worked and I'm like, oh, in 5 minutes, I'm supposed to be there.
Hey. So, stay PR and
Sure.
things around that.
Let me just if this comes up. All right. For the record, Representative O'Brien, Windsor Orange 1, that's Royalton and my hometown of Tunbridge. And I serve on House Ag. So the bill I'm introducing today, let's see if I can fit it here. H-476, an act relating to establishing a mechanized logging and trucking training program. This act, I can give you a little background on where it came from. But first, I was reminded of Chair Marcotte's recognition yesterday, I guess it was, during Manufacturing Day, of that relationship between sort of business and higher education. And this, the idea for this bill, it's really just an idea. It's a short form bill. So the idea is, a lot of bills that I introduced this year are really just ideas that I sort of wanted formalized, and committees of jurisdiction, if they're really interested, hopefully could take them up and look into them a lot further. This one came out of since the House Agricultural Forest, Food Resiliency and Forestry, we cover a lot of all forest economy work. And Sam Lincoln, who he was the deputy commissioner of FPR, and Dana Doran, who's up in Maine, he's the director of the Northeast Professional Loggers Association. They testified a lot last year. And one of the just sort of side things that came up was there's a program in Maine where, connected, I think, to their university system, where it's an intensive sort of, I think it may be 12 weeks of training for both trucking and using this sort of modern logging. It's not a chainsaw anymore. It's all these feller bunchers and forwarders and things like that. And these things all cost, $500,000 to over $1 million. And so they, the university has enlisted the manufacturing companies to essentially sponsor these things, whether it's Caterpillar or John Deere or whoever, for these $1 million machines. So it's connected to the university, and what you end up with is hopefully a CDL and a certain amount of high level training for using these very expensive machines. So the problem main thing, but we're saying here, is that the average age of a logger is, I think, 59, 60. So you think of our Representative Lipsky, who's the septuagenarian logger. We're not that far away from that. So we need to create a whole new generation of loggers if the forest economy is going to thrive here. And the VTC, the Vermont State University at Randolph, I think used to have a program that did some of this, but was, I think, discontinued. And so it'd be nice to somehow revive a similar program and maybe bring in corporate sponsors too, who would have a reason to invest in this. And I know my son is at Vermont State University in the auto tech program, and I recently met a mechanic who we on our farm, we run our wedding business. And so this groom came, and he's a mechanic in Norwich for actually the Andover Co-op system. They have a garage, but he was trained in New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, sort of similar, they have various shops. So like GM connected to New Hampshire Technical Institute. So like GM or Toyota have their own sort of within the university system training for future mechanics. And I suspect this is somewhat similar that what Maine has done there. So I think further testimony could be had by the Sam Lincolns or Dana Dorans, see what's happening at Vermont State University in the forest economy. It's interesting, when I served on the dairy task force with Chair Marcotte, one of his ideas was we need more CDL trained drivers in this state in a big way. And his idea there was it was for milk truck drivers, but it's such a asset to have. Once you have a CDL, right, it could be, you could drive a log truck, you could drive a milk truck, whatever it is, but we certainly have a shortage of them right now. There he is. Just telling me about your idea on the dairy task force about we need more CDLs. Which nothing ever came out of that, but it's.
There were some ideas that we had that to do different things that wasn't supported, I think, by the farmer.
Right, yeah. So that's the basic idea for the short form bill. How it might be slightly different. I mean, Maine's, I think their forest economy is certainly a lot bigger than ours. It's in a lot of ways different because they're much bigger tracts of forest land they're logging, but there's some similarities, and the equipment's probably very similar. So I'm sure we would love to have somebody who got trained in Maine work here, but even better, we'd love to have Vermont-based training that really bred a whole new generation of loggers and truckers.
Michael?
So the training would also be structured to allow participants to obtain a commercial driver's license. So would this be a training that is created? Because there are companies out there that do training. So I'm wondering if you're thinking also possibly about your situation.
I think so. And how that would work within, say, the Vermont State University system, or perhaps the sponsors, I'm not sure about that partnership. I think it could be structured to, depending on what people want or what kind of, what the student body looks like who would like to end up with a CDL.
I was curious how this interacts with the CTE activities. Is this +1? Southwest Tech has its logging and forestry program. It has some agreements with Paul Smith's College and Keene State, and noticeably,
So CTE is what?
The Career and Technical Education down in Southwestern.
Okay.
The career centers. And so
The high school one.
yeah, and so there was and I saw that some of them have like CDL and game of logging, and I was just curious where, but I think they're not at all the tech centers. Like not all of them have these programs. It seems like some of them do, but is there in speaking with industry, is there a bit more people need to really be ready to go than some of the stuff that our CTEs are providing?
I don't know as far as do CTEs have sort of like a VAST program? Do they have a sort of incubator for CDL drivers, or I don't know how much they do in the sort of forest economy, but it'd be interesting to say, like, at the career centers to have a vast program where, you know, you do 1 year that then could jump on to, say, a first year in college, or to finish up your intensive, say, 16-week course.
Great. That's-
Yeah, I'm just looking on the Forest Parks and Rec website and found that we have a logger education program, like the LEAP program. So would this tie into like already existing programs?
I think it would make sense to coordinate them, you know, so you don't have redundancies. And I don't know how much that is connected, say, to our state university system. Yeah, so
I'm just.
that would be good to have FPR, yeah,
Yeah,
describe that program.
the LEAP, it looks like the LEAP program is its own nonprofit organization that trains loggers in mechanized logging. But then there's also the Northeast Master Loggers Certification Program. I don't know.
That's the one I'm talking about, I think, in Maine. I think it's connected to that.
Okay, so it looks like those two programs actually may be connected. When I was just looking at their training opportunities, it looks like they do train in Heartland, Vermont. They do CPR and then logger fleet over there. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're certainly, like the game of logging, like some of these programs, they exist. But I'm not sure it's as intensive, or you end up with, say, a guaranteed CDL or a certain certification to use $1 million feller buncher at the end of it. And I assume hireability would be, you know, off the charts if you successfully completed this program.
That was pretty much my question too.
Okay. So you mentioned that, I think, a program in Maine
Mhm.
that you were looking at. Do you know how they fund that program by any chance?
I think it's, you know, partly the state college system, but I think that the big deal here is that with corporate sponsors, they're investing in these programs too, because it helps them ultimately in that you have trained operators familiar with their equipment, and hopefully those future loggers go out and buy, you know.
So in Maine, they have sponsors, but it's sort of run through the university system to sort of organize it.
Right, yeah, and that's what the parallel I was going to say, GM or Toyota at New Hampshire
Right.
Auto Tech. I don't know quite how these work, but I assume that there's a business, you know, higher ed relationship there that.
So I think short from, so you can't say everything, sure. But it looks like you're looking for federal funding. Like, kind of everything's up in the air. I guess.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
It might be good to be in touch with the Vermont State University system and see what happened to their former programs. I think they withered from lack of interest for the most part, sort of similar to, say, like the dairy farm at VTC, you know, being sold off. So it's or the 2+2 program was this: you do 2 years at VTC and then you do 2 years at UVM. And there's so few applicants that we've sort of paused that whole program.
I know that yesterday at Manufacturing Industry Day, one of the people testified about need for more support of the forest product industry field to around those things. So certainly this is a timely.
Yeah. And you know, even this was, I think, pretty narrow focused as far as sort of log truck drivers and operators, but potentially I could see the sort of sister programs of how to use the really sophisticated equipment in sawmills. We had Trevor Allard from Allard's Lumber, biggest in Vermont, I think, logging sawmill, and he was describing some of the things like a planer operator who makes a mistake, you just destroy a $2 million planer. So a certain amount of training is very important in that world. And there's certainly, I don't think, any university programs that supply that training.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Hey, maybe, take a 15-minute break at 10. We'll start looking at S117 and S1.